The sun, this is the whole point of today. So the sun in mythology. Now, when you look at most mythos around the world, the sun's a central figure. The sun represents life force for obvious reasons. The world comes to life when the sun comes out. And the seasons when the sun is low in the sky, well, plants just don't grow. Crops don't come to fruition. If we have a bad season of rain or cloud and things like that, our lives are a lot more difficult than they would be. The sun's been critical to our survival as a species. Um, the sun is the symbol of power and authority. It's the most exalted figure in the sky. The luminaries, the sun and the moon, dominate all mythos of the world. They're the two most critical figures, and they represent our relationship to duality, which defines us. And I think, I feel if there wasn't a sun and there wasn't a moon, we probably wouldn't have followed the mental track that we have. We wouldn't have developed the way that we have. We've had these two vivid examples of duality and opposition imprinted on us in our very DNA right from the very, very beginning. And the sun and the moon are the ambassadors of that. They're the rulers of that. So the sun in itself is a symbol of power and authority. The moon's often credited as a symbol of madness, intuition, and emotion, of perhaps even danger. We're a species that live by our circadian rhythms. We've only really moved away from them in the last 1,000 years, I guess. But we've aligned ourselves to the sun. And a lot of people say when you start living by your circadian rhythms, well, your body, everything in your world just seems to follow. Just mindful of those hours that you lose. The sun represents in most mythos elimination and enlightenment as well. So if there's a goal to life, if there's an afterlife, many have felt that it is the sun, or it's at very least the sky. And I'm going back to the most primitive cultures there. So even right from the beginning, we've acknowledged as a species that there is perhaps a more perfect world, and it's not here. It's above us, but it's always with us. It's always returning, and it's always something that's coming back. We see that theme in a lot of mythologies as well. Even when we don't see it, it will come back again, So I guess that's got a lot to do with that. The cycles of life. The position of the sun in relation to the earth determines the seasons. Back when I was at school, this is one of the things that was overturned. My teacher, this is going right back to primary school, believed that winter and the seasons when it was colder, the Earth's orbit was further away from the sun than it is. So that we were spinning in this big sort of egg-shaped pattern going around the sun. That's been disproved, obviously. But the sun is the symbol of the cycles of life, the seasons, the cycles of nature. They all follow the proximity to the sun. So the sun has rulership of that. In that regard, so probably the connotation of the sun is it represents protection and nurturing in many cultures. The sun warms us. The sun provides us everything that we need to live and to live comfortably. And you know what I mean? When the sun shines, we make hay, and that hay becomes the key to our survival in leaner times. So the sun is the symbol for protection and nurturing. And as cultures have become more progressed, the sun has also become the catalyst for spiritual growth. So we've looked at the sun as the direction to follow in our own spirituality, at least in the earlier times. In most earlier cultures, if there's a hierarchy to the gods, the sun sits at the top. As cultures have become more refined and we've become more aware of, I guess, of philosophy and science and medicine and all of those other things, once we've conquered the lessons of the sun, we've had new gods that have come up, and they've lifted humanity in different ways, and perhaps the sun's taken a lesser role in some degrees, or a less critical role. But right when we go back to the origin, you'll find in most cultures and most mythologies, the sun in its most primitive societies has always been right at the top of the food chain. Unless they're inherently dark, then they worship things like volcanoes or the moon or things like that. Those cultures don't tend to last. So that's, I guess, a lesson in that in itself. Okay, so when we start looking at the gods, we're looking at Apollo in Greece. He was the god of creativity, of music, of healing. So, the nurturing energy of the sun, the healing energy of the sun, he's been a part of that. I can see people writing notes. I'll make this PowerPoint available at the end too. If people want to download it, they're quite welcome to. He was the symbol of vitality. He was also the symbol of prophecy as well. So, when the sun disappeared over the horizon, the next day he came back, and he came back with stories, predictions, and so on. The sun in ancient Greece was also the symbol of leadership. Apollo was a leader. He's associated with enlightenment, knowledge, artistic inspiration, and healing. He brings clarity, creativity, and harmony to humanity, guiding people towards intellectual pursuits, artistic expression, and spiritual growth. So he's a leader, a guide, and a benevolent figure. In Egypt, the sun god was Ra. He was the symbol of life, warmth, growth, the cycles of life, transformation, and nurturing. So their manifesto is pretty much similar. And you can see that. And you're going to find as you go through a lot of cultures around the world, it's pretty much the same. He provided vitality, fertility, and protection. It doesn't take a stretch of the imagination to see why. He sustains life, ensures the cycles of day and night, and represents the divine order and balance in the universe. Just as a digression, I went to an exhibit at a museum here in Brisbane. When the mummies first came to Brisbane, they had an exhibition, and a scientist, she came over, she was part of the team that had dug them up. So, something she said was crazy to me. The Egyptians didn't believe the brain as an organ served a purpose. When they weighed you up, they weighed the heart. They only cared about the heart, and they thought that human thought and human desire and everything came from the heart. They had no purpose for the brain in Egyptian medicine. And when the pharaohs their organs were put into canoptic jars, they tended to toss the brain, didn't do a lot. So just sort of throw that out there. For the Egyptians, the heart was way, way more important than the brain. The brain, they actually couldn't even figure out what the brain did. Yeah. Okay, in India, in the Hindu culture, the sun goddess Surya, which is energy, strength, enlightenment, vitality, courage, and the pursuit of truth. So we see an advancement of that, and in some ways, perhaps an extension of what Apollo was representative of in many ways. The search for truth, for courage and vitality as well. In Japan, Amaterasu was benevolence, harmony, renewal, the power of light, and the ability to push back the darkness. That was her domain, and vitality. So again, we're seeing all these crossovers in that. It's pretty straightforward what the sun represents in that regard to earlier cultures. Just the last one here on the gods. In the Norse mythology, the sun god was Sol, who was warmth, cycles of life, renewal, growth in the seasons. Again, same things. For the Incans, it was Inti, warmth, fertility, abundance, prosperity, and again, the cycles of nature too. So you can see right from the beginning, and all of these cultures start to separate out. They have less contact with one another, but they all are arriving at the same points at more or less the same time as well. The Inca culture was quite separated from everybody else, the Norse and especially the Japanese too. So, we've all grown with the same ideas and it's all become an integrated part of our DNA. Okay, so when we look at the sun on the chart, we look at the sun as the symbol of vitality and life force. If you have a well-aspected sun, then, and by well-aspected, I mean it's connected up well. It's in a sign that like our Leos are enjoying right now, where it's getting some good stage time. Well, generally health tends to follow and vitality and energy and flow from there. So the sun represents the body and health, if we put a gross figure on it in astrology and things like that. It also rules self-identity and ego, self-awareness, the awareness of us as a self. Has anybody watched a newborn baby sitting there and then noticing its arms coming up in the left and the right and freaking out? Have you seen that look on its face because it doesn't know what that arm is? It's incredible to me, and it's bizarre because a baby will always look you in the eyes. They don't look anywhere else. They know to look in your eyes. So they are aware of your eyes, but they're not aware of their arm. Their arm is an anomaly. I could never figure that out when my daughter was born. It just haunted me. But what that's telling us is we're not self-aware at birth. We're connected to everything else that's happening around us. We're aware now that a baby is aware of its environment and everything that's going on around it pre-birth. At a certain stage, basically a baby comes online, becomes aware of its universe and the stuff that's happening around it. It's aware of mum, it's aware of dad, and other figures in the life and things like that. As we learn from Audrey Hepburn, it's also aware of the environments and things that are happening in the world at the time. And the Dutch after that who were born, heavier than Audrey Hepburn, which everybody was. And so a baby in the womb is super aware of everything that's going on around it, but it's not aware of itself in the same way. The seeds of consciousness aren't there. Certainly the awareness of the physical body is not there. So that's a learned journey. Once the baby's born or manifested, then the journey begins, and the understanding its journey through the sun begins. And I believe when you look at the chart and when you look at the position of the sun, it'll tell you a lot about that journey that that person's taken. Some signs like Aquarius, the sun's already in its detriment there, So physically, Aquarians don't tend to be physically as strong as everybody else. We lean into our minds a lot more. I saw that look on Michael's face as you're like, well, speak for yourself. But self-awareness, self-identity, and ego is a journey. It's not something we're given right at the beginning. It's something that's determined by our relationship with the world and how we see our role in that, how we see that impact us, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? It's our critique of the world. It's feedback about the world all the time. Confidence is the same thing. Confidence, we're not born with confidence. Some of us are more confident than others at birth, but then I guess some of us haven't had the knockbacks that others have had, or is cautious. Confidence is something that we need to nurture. It's constantly being evaluated. It's the same as life. In many ways, the sun is the symbol of our vitality and our life force, our body, our health, our self-identity, our ego, our self-expression, our confidence, all of that sort of stuff. But it's always subject to change. It's in that regard, when you look at it, the sun in many ways is our manifestation in its most temporary form. It also comes with all of our limitations as well. So all of the other planets, when we look at their rulership and the things that they do, they operate independently, but the sun right at the center of the solar system, when it's on our chart, in many ways, I look at it as being also our limitations, our mortality, our relationship and our dependence on the world around us. If we're not being nurtured by the sun, we're dying. So that's another way of looking at it. It's probably a bit of a Russian way of looking at it. The sun represents leadership and authority. Just because we've got a well-aspected sun doesn't mean we're great leaders. Doesn't mean that we're going to be great leaders. If you have a look at the natal chart of John F. Kennedy, his sun is not particularly well aspected at all. I think there's one aspect running off it. Just having a well aspected sun is not a guarantee of leadership qualities. And I think if you're going to try and understand the puzzle that's JFK, you need to really start looking at everything else in the chart. I think his chart also is super karmic. I think in some ways, sacrifice was inevitable for him. So that was a part of it. I think it was part of his journey. Anyway, the sun represents individuality and creativity. So it's connected to our exploration of the world. Children probably are the most vivid and burning example of the sun when they're born, because they're learning all these things, they're discovering all these things, discovering their limitations, finding where everything begins and everything ends. They're experiencing everything for the first time. They're the sun in the most vivid form. As they get older and older, we start to introduce other stuff, and we start squashing that individuality and that exploration of that creativity out of them. They start living in the same world as adults. I think that's an incredible time. If you want to see the sun in its purest form, look at kids. Because they're feeling everything for the first time, and they're touching everything and experiencing everything. And that's the sun in its most naive, most unrefined form, without the white noise of other planets, of other experiences, of tougher times and all of that sort of stuff, and without responsibilities and roles and expectations and all of that stuff. That's the sun in its purest form. Now, if you look at the sun as being the fulcrum, the anchor of the solar system, then the more planets we have aspected to the sun, it suggests stronger personality integration. So if a sun's well aspected and it's connected off to a lot of other planets, quite often in astrology it will intensify the strength of the sun. and it will also create harmony and order in the planets that are connected to it or in orbit of it. I'm talking about harmonious aspects. If you've got a sun in a stellium that's surrounded by other planets, all in conjunction to it, and things like that, personality can be very strong, and will benefit from all those other planets that are around there. And again, so I'm looking at the model of the solar system. That's getting right back to the times of Babylon. That's when we first started critically thinking about our relationship to the sun and the planets around us. So a well-aspected sun with positive aspects coming to it suggests by its very nature, because the sun, one of the rulerships of the sun is harmony. It suggests that there may be inner harmony in the personality as well, that this person's able to access different tools, an arsenal of different tools, that they all naturally become a part of the personality and the ego of that person. So it doesn't necessarily make them a good person. I'll just put that caveat up there. Just a very, very effective one. Yeah. Does anybody have any thoughts so far? Anybody want to rebut or question or anything like that, or throw something else in that they want to expand on that? Nobody heard anything crazy there? Too different from the scripts? No deviations? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. The sun also rules father figures. So if the moon is the mother, the sun is also the father. However, that isn't necessarily the be all and end all, depending on the relationship. And when you talk to your client, if the more and more you realize the client's relationship with the father was not healthy, it was not strong, maybe the father was rigid or cruel or hard, or had up to expectations that were too high of the child, then we look to Saturn on the chart. Saturn can also be the ruler, the father. I guess, and a lot of that's determined by the relationship. So the sun represents father figures, but it's not a given. Saturn can also play a role in that too. Just throwing that out there as a little caveat.
So, like if Saturn were opposite the sun, that would definitely indicate a father figure. Do you think?
Well, I've had you think about it, let's look at it from a critical thinking point of view. In many ways, we expect children look to them, and I'm getting very, very traditional and very nuclear family here. I'm going to get away from pronouns and prefixes and all of that sort of stuff and go right back to thousands of years of development of the human race, getting back to a time where the father was the hunter and the mother was the gatherer. We look to the mother for emotional support, nurturing and guidance, and we look to the father as an example how to live life. We looked at the father as a prototype for personality and who we wanted to be, especially for boys. For boys, it's very, very important. We evolved as a species, and you know what, as society became a lot more complicated than the hunter-gatherer societies that we've become, the relationship with the father has also changed as well, the role, the expectations of family. We've evolved as a human race, and I think in many ways looking at Saturn as the father on the chart reflects that. If the child has had, if you're sitting and talking to a client and you're looking at the sun and you're using that as an example of the father, and they're not shaking their head and saying, yeah, no, he really wasn't like that at all. Then start asking some questions about Saturn, and you might be getting on a closer track on the way things turned out. And then obviously look at where Saturn is on the chart. That'll tell you a lot. That introduction to astrology course that I've got, that assignment at the end there, that the whole story about Robert coming to you with breaking up with his girlfriend and things like that. The father is definitely Saturn on the chart. I put that there. I put the father that way for exactly that reason, as a teachable moment for people to come in expecting it to be the sun every time, because it's not. Yeah, and you'll find that where I've had clients who've had really strained relationships with their father, and it's always Saturn on the chart. So
I agree. It's definitely Saturn.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now that
And
you break it down like that, and I can refer back to my chart and my relationship with my father, and my Saturn is in the ninth house and it's retrograde,
yeah,
and he was very, he kept us in church and all that good stuff. Anyway, so I can definitely see where the Saturn would represent the father. So thank you.
that's great. Things we've got an inner revulsion about in the world around us, sometimes we learn those at an early age. So, and
Mm-hmm.
quite, they were forced on us, they were limitations. Sun doesn't limit, not the same way that Saturn does. Yeah.
Cool. Yes.
No worries. Does anybody else have any other questions or anything to add? Is there anything missing from that you feel like you would want to add to that?
So I have Saturn and Sun in my fourth house.
Okay.
um,
Wow.
so yeah, and Moon.
I have questions. How did that play out?
Well, as I
Sounds
said
like
earlier,
Punch and Judy.
I don't often feel very Leonian, because it's like the undercurrent urge to be like that picture you have on the screen. It sort of represents, I feel like it represents my soul, and what lies beneath, but it always feels restricted in its self-expression.
Yeah, yeah. I hear you. Look. I'm a big advocate of esoteric astrology, and when I see Saturn performing a police action on a chart, like sitting right on top of the ruler of the sign, I get my ears prick up straight away. I get really, really interested. My wife's the same. She's got a Jupiter with Saturn sitting right on it, and she's Sagittarius. So it's like you want to be a Sagittarius, but you can't. And the more you try to be, the harder it gets. You've got all those instincts, but you're just not allowed to follow through. And I'm wondering if the experience is the same for you.
Very much so, yeah.
Yeah, okay. In an instance like that, especially, and that could be a frustrating one because when you're young, if I was to look at it as a story, some people that might be, gosh, the child who wants to get out of home so they can start living, and then they get out in the world and they realize the world's wired just the same way, you know. Because that's the way it is by design. Saturn's going to be sitting right on that sun wherever you go, whether it's family, whether it's not. You're going to constantly find yourself comparing your experiences to growing up. You left in a no man's land of wondering, do I feel this way because this is the environment I was raised in, or is this the way that it's supposed to be, and things like that. So, that's just a
Yeah,
simplified way of
it
looking at it.
kind of feels like there's a deeper understanding of it emerging at this
Yeah,
point in my life. And it's almost like, the a lot of the Leo instinct them have for a purpose to always bring me back to heart.
yeah,
And that being the main Leonian quality that I need to be with in this lifetime. But there is also obviously the instinct in me to drive forward with certain things, and then second guess them constantly.
yeah. Gosh,
It's fun.
I hear you. I hear you. No, that makes sense. Have you done the esoteric astrology course?
Doing that one at the moment, yeah.
Okay, all right. Plug. But it's got answers for that. Like I said, Saturn rules karma in esoteric astrology. So wherever that's sitting, that's a karma you're going to be working through. And it's not for you. It's not necessarily family, but that's where you're going to start learning those lessons. They hit you early, wherever they
Yeah.
express. Hit you early, and then you go out into the world carrying that mark or that brand or whatever, and you compare it to everything that touches you after that. So for Leo, it's about being strong. For everybody else, it's about being supportive, at least in esoteric astrology. So all that regality and all that bombastic nature, that's for other people. It's not for yourself, which
Yeah.
sucks if you're
And
a
I've
Leo.
just under this eclipse had this massive realization about how I throw myself into trying to save people the way that I tried to save my dad
Okay.
throughout my childhood. And it's like, whoa, okay, that's where all my energy is going. And right now I know how to take another path. So that's been a bit fascinating.
Oh, that's amazing. It's like I was saying though, in the fourth house, you're going to keep comparing everything that's happening to you back to your childhood. It's going to keep linking you back to that moment and presenting with you again and again, like a puzzle that you've just got to keep solving, a Rubik's Cube that won't go away, you know. So that's incredible. Gosh, and that's difficult too, Sun and Saturn together. For a Leo, gosh, you
Yeah,
must have
and
been
moon.
naughty in a
Definitely
past
a moon.
lifetime. Yeah,
Clearly.
yeah. Love it. Absolutely love it. Does anybody else want to add anything? Okay. The form. Okay, so let's look at the form. The sun. The sun rules the physical body, the heart and the circulatory system. Energy levels. So if your energy levels are fluctuating up and down, quite often you can see that in the chart too, or the house that it's in. It also rules your mental and emotional wellness. And it's funny that it rules that. You know, you could almost take the word wellness away. Has anybody lived in close proximity to somebody with bipolar 2? I've got that overinflated ego and things like that, or worked with somebody who's got bipolar 2 and things like that, and not taking their meds and things like that. You know, I was working in human services for a long time, and I used to look after our bipolar and schizophrenic clients. And for 99% of bipolars who came in, their sad story started with, you know, things were going well, so I thought I'd stop taking my medication. And the worst thing about that is bipolar 2 conflates the ego in a lot of ways. And you can't always see it. You're naturally living in a high, and you're living in a state of constant exaggeration. And it inevitably becomes self-destructive, or it consumes everything that's around it. And you think of it as one of those red giant suns burning up a solar system in a lot of ways. So when I see mental and emotional wellness, it's not a guarantee of mental and emotional wellness. Egotism, narcissism, a lot of those mental illnesses that target the ego are an example of a massive imbalance, perhaps in sun placements on a chart too. It's our sense of self and our relationship with the world around us as well. That would be a way to maybe capture that phrase, mental and emotional wellness. So if you've got an unregulated sun, your relationships with the people around you may not be what they are. It may simply be your own ego attachment to what you think is going on and things like that too. That's not uncommon. We've all met people like that. If you've got an afflicted sun, it doesn't matter how confident you sound. I've got a sun that's in a fairly healthy placement on my chart. I did a management test, the Myers and Briggs ones down in Sydney when I was doing management training. And I came up as an extreme introvert on the test, which scared the hell out of my boss, because in the office I was probably the most extroverted person in there. So even if you have a poorly aspected sun, or you're an Aquarius or something like that, which means your sun is broken by design, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a clear reflection of how your personality is going to play out, or how your vitality is going to play out. All those other factors weigh in. But when we look at mental and emotional wellness, it's completely subjective. What the client thinks is healthy may not be what actually the rest of the world thinks is healthy, where the people in their lives think they're healthy. That client who comes in and starts bitching about their relationship and how stupid their wife is, or their husband, and they don't seem to get this and that, and I'm trying so hard and stuff like this. And the more of the story they tell, the more you realize, well, you're a bit of an ass. You know, that can be the sun out of control. You know, and they're not always the victim in their story, or at least they don't think they are. They quite often think they're the person doing everything the right way, you know, and it's the rest of the world. Every other person they've met in their whole life who's got it wrong, you know. So I don't know how you ignore that level of evidence, but some people are capable of it. We meet them all the time. Quite often we end up in relationships with them.
Yes, yes.
And I don't know what we feel we need to learn from that, but we learn it pretty fast.
I've learned a lot.
Yeah, so mental and emotional wellness, I guess the point I'm trying to make is it's completely subjective. It depends who you ask. Just
Totally.
having a powerful sun on a chart doesn't mean that you're the sanest person in the room, not by a long shot. Okay. So, and that's again too what I mean, you know, when you go down and your knowledge of astrology is based on a whole bunch of keywords that you haven't really drilled down to and explored. I think it doesn't hurt to step back and start asking yourself these things. And again, too, going back and looking, well, what did the Mayans have to say about this? You don't have to go that far. But there's an evolution on what that is. You know, what is mental and emotional wellness? You know, question things like that. Don't take them as a given. Right from the beginning, the sun, you know, by all means, when we start exploring that, I think it makes more sense. I see, especially narcissism, especially egotism, especially bipolar 2, things like that, especially bullying behavior. God, you go back 1,000 years ago, a bully was the healthiest person in the room. He's probably going to be the leader of your clan. You know what I mean? For you, the one being bullied, it's not necessarily the healthiest thing you've seen. But a strong, well-aspected son is quite capable of being a bully and feeling good about it, very good about it. It's like, you ask them, so, imagine you're me for a minute, but I don't. That's a strong, strong sun placement, isn't it? They don't have to be you because they don't want to. Simple as that. Has anybody had any experiences like that or want to add something to that?
I just want to say that I'm glad to hear you speak about the sun. It's become much more expansive. You speak about emotional and mental well-being, and immediately I'm thinking that's the moon and that's Mercury, but you're right. A couple of weeks ago, I read something and it makes sense with what you just said. So for me, it just clicked. It said that all the planets basically work for the sun.
That's right. They revolve around the sun. A well-aspected sun is a
Right.
integrated personality.
They're like little helpers and workers. So why
Yeah.
shouldn't the sun be as important as it is? Because it's what's going out into the world. It's my thoughts, it's my emotions, it's everything.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of people that saying, oh, the sun is not everything in astrology, but it's very important. There's a reason why it's so important. So I'm glad to hear that, wow. And yeah, I was one of those people that keywords. So I'm like, boom. So thank you.
Right. Also too, if the planets that are aspected to it have a big impact too. If the only aspect that your sun's got is to Pluto, you know what I mean? You immediately get a personality type. That's like I said, yeah. It doesn't.
We'll talk about aspects in another class, right?
Well, yeah. I guess we'll come back and we'll look at that. Maybe we'll just do another workshop on that, and we'll go through each one and talk about them and get down to some of the ones that aren't into the courses too, or those little itty bitty ones that can make quite a difference as well. So we'll put a pin in that one and come back to that. But I agree with you too. I'm not a doom and gloom astrologer. I hear a lot of people talk about that, but I'm a realist, and I think I've worked with enough people and seen enough stuff to realize you need to have a pretty expansive toolkit if you expect to work with people and have some pretty wide expectations. And I think in order to be able to do that, you need to expand your knowledge. You've got to explore the dark stuff because people are going to bring you their darkness. Yeah, it doesn't have to be your darkness, but you need to be ready for that. And we've all had our own share of it anyway. We know it's out there. It doesn't mean it defines us, and it doesn't mean we're attached to it. It also doesn't make us villains when we start talking about it as well. I think if we're really going to do our job, we need to utilize our experience and our knowledge our experience and our skills as much as our knowledge. I don't think our knowledge defines everything. Far from it. Far from it. Like Lao Tzu, the philosopher, said, knowledge by itself achieves nothing. Absolutely nothing. I agree. Yeah.
You make I really appreciate your point, Damien, because I have done charts, and every time I do a chart, I fall in love with the person. And my charts, I'm doing them independently. So the people give me their information, and then sometimes I don't meet them until after. And so I'm kind of operating in this little void of not really knowing the person. And I always make the assumption they're an amazing person. And I write it in this very glowing, very positive, and that's how I sort of see the world anyway. But I've had a couple people where then I meet them and I'm like, oh my gosh, I saw these placements and they made me think, oh crap, this person's probably not the nicest person. But I'm always like, no. And then lo and behold, they'll start talking to me and I'm like, oh my gosh, this person has narcissistic tendencies, or they dominate the conversation and they don't even want to hear what I have to say. And it's just the weirdest experience. So you're very validating in that you do have to kind of use your intuition and your sense, and then really trust what you're seeing in the chart, because some of these things that are not positive per se they show up. It's like, you know,
I agree. I probably, if I was to describe the way I look at charts and criteria, I probably sounds like a sociopath, but I think we're all inherently lazy inside. Of course, when I say that, I talk about our journey as a kid when we grow up. We don't grow up with all the knowledge we've got now, so we'll choose the path of least resistance. Things that make us happiest, quickest, things that scare us and make us sad, we avoid. And you can generally see those things on the chart straight away. So in that regard, I mean, we're all generally pretty lazy. We'll find the path that'll get us what we want as quickly as possible with the least amount of effort. And you can generally get an indication of where that is on the chart. And that's why I keep talking about a flow. You'll see where everything's pointing off. You'll also, when you look at that, you'll also see how people undo themselves. You know, people who want to lose weight but keep eating donuts, things like that. Yeah, it's a really rough example, but you can see it, generally see it on the chart. That's where all the energy's flowing on that chart. And I start from there. So I don't make assumptions about people. I look for tendencies straight away, and I'll start asking questions that and see which one of those tendencies lights up, and I'll build out from there. You know, I'm happy with the client doing most of the talking. So, you know, and I'll talk and I'll ask questions to get them going. Well, you've seen it in that reading techniques course. I get questions to get them going, but those questions are guided. I know which questions I generally want to ask, but then I've kind of cheated from the beginning anyway, because I tend to ask the client what they want from the reading. So I use that as a guide. And I just find for me, it's less likely to get lost in it, less likely to get a poor opinion of the person. The way they phrase their questions, words that people use in conversation, stuff like that. When we did the chart for Sydney, he said, and on the timeline of things, that line, bang, as soon as that came out, I thought, okay, we process things on a mental level, but we've got a long game running in the background and things. You know, people, we use key words that will invite you into their thought models and the way that they do things and stuff like that. And I think, in that way, you know, it's a shared journey. I think even if the client thinks they know where they want to go at the beginning, you don't always end up there, but you always end up somewhere. So I think that being said, I think that's just because you're inherently a good person. You know, I don't want to squash that out of you. You know, hold on to that. For 90% of your clients, it sounds like that's right on the money. And look, if I was feeling pretty shitty about my life and I wanted a reading that was going to pick me right up, you are right at the top of my list. I'll come see you straight away.
Yeah,
that's right. That actually is how I
you are
kind of
hitting a
frame my
niche,
astrology.
and you're hitting it hard. So I just don't, you know, you fly that flag, you'll attract the right clients. Every once in a while, everybody comes through. You know, hey, that's 20% is a good figure. It's a good figure for bad hits. 80%, you know, if 80% of your clients are good and they like that positive message and they come out feeling energized and stuff like that, then you are Leo in its full glory. You're doing your job. So,
Well, see, I have so much Cancer. I'm actually really more of a Cancer. So
you don't
so
say.
that probably makes a lot more sense to me now that I'm going to be everybody's mom. Like when I'm doing their chart, I'm trying to just be their mom and like hype them up. But yeah, it is funny how you do see that that's not how the world is. People don't really show up that way, you know.
That's all right. Just because the world's not that way doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to make it that way. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
So,
thank you. That's a nice way to
yeah.
live.
Well, it's a difficult way to live too, but it doesn't make it wrong. So, you know, yeah. Okay. So that's the form. The ego and identity. It rules our core identity, the development of the ego, self-confidence and assertiveness. So in a lot of ways, it's if we're keeping a running log and a spreadsheet of our experiences and our experiments of power, I like to use those terms, through life, the things that make us strong. And you see that with children, you know, they seem to go through key points. They start out so helpless. Then suddenly they reach an age with their little nightmares, you know, the terrible twos or the threes and things like that. And then they go to school and then they start interacting with one another. And it was interesting when we did the chart reading for Beth, she talked about nobody's more vicious to each other than children. It's so true, you know, school culture and things like that. In a lot of ways, if I was an anthropologist and studying children, really, I'd be studying the sun. That's my feeling. you know, and our experiences with the sun and our experiments with power and the things that make us strong, the things that build culture, the things that build our roles, our perception of our role in society. Some of us immediately start heading to the fringes. You know, I'm not like the other kids. I don't want the same things that they do. I'm softer than the other kids, and they'll hurt me if I get too close. Or if I get in their way. We've got other ones who rise up and become leaders. We've got other ones who become bullies. We've got other ones who are the crazy kid. And every class has got a crazy kid, you know, who did crazier stuff than everybody else. You know, the sun in a lot of ways is a cross study of that. It's an example of the development of the ego. And it's schools are an incubator in many ways that show us all the different directions the sun can go. Because it's unfiltered, but we see a progression, you know. You know, that probably in a lot of ways wraps that up. That wraps up self-confidence and assertiveness. Some become more confident at school. Some have their confidence snuffed out mercilessly and quickly. Some become leaders. The sun is the core of the personality and the anchor for the other planets, like Antoinette said. It's the connecting point. You know, everything else works for the sun. That's why Leos believe everybody else works for them. So it's in them by design. That's the way the sun's supposed to work. So, you know, it's the world's job to prove them wrong.
That's why they're a leader.
That's right. Okay, individuality and creativity. These are taken from the Oxford Dictionary. So the term individual, a single human being as distinct from a particular group or from society in general. When you look at that in terms of the sun, in some ways it sounds contradictory, but that echoes what I was saying before. I think when it comes to sentience, the human race, the one thing that separates us from all the animals in the animal kingdom is we believe individually, every single one of us inside, that we're alone to some greater or lesser degree. We're the only species that thinks that way, doesn't integrate with the rest of the world. I think I may be oversimplifying, but at the most simplified level, that's what I see. It defines our urge for society. It decides and defines our urge for family and connection and all of that stuff. People who don't feel that as strong don't need those same connections that everybody else does. Yeah. But people who feel that separation and that loneliness are driven. So individuality, if we look at that, seeing the word individual doesn't guarantee, when you look at the sun, that we are individuals, that we have the strength to stand up about everybody else. It's a word as a placeholder to define where we see ourselves in relation to the rest of the world. Yeah. So again, people with well-aspected suns are potentially optimistic, or they're potentially magnetic. Magnetic is a quality of the sun. People are drawn to them. They don't worry about it so much. People who have, say, a sun with Saturn sitting right on top of it may not have the same experience. You know, you may be constantly questioning. You may be questioning your relationships. You may be questioning your worth or your value to other people all the time, or to yourself. You may be questioning your own ego. You know, do I really feel that way? Do I deserve to feel that way? I'm not talking about you, Sandra, when I'm saying this, but I'm using that as an example.
It's all true.
Okay. So individuality, that word is just an exploration of that concept. There's no guarantee in it. People with strong suns aren't necessarily individual. You know, when I grew up, we believed socially that extroverts were stronger than introverts. Introverts were needy and stuff like that. But the more science and psychology has gone, the more we see the flip side of that. Introverts don't need other people. Extroverts, on the other hand, when they're starved of human contact and things like that, they wither up in corners and die, I hear. So, you know, that's another way of looking at the word individual. The spectrum we've got for individuality it's not individuality less and individuality ness. It's generally introvert and extrovert, and that's just a description of where they are on the scale and how much we need other people, how we see ourselves in relation to everybody else and stuff like that too. It's an invitation for discussion rather than a given. That's what I'm saying. You know, how do you function in these situations? Are you social in groups when you're working around other people? Even with a healthy sun, those people may be needier than other people. They may need other people around them worshiping them, or at least validating them and telling them nice stuff about themselves. And they may be more prone to flattery than other people. That may be their weakness, their demon that always catches them out every time. You know, So individuality is not a given. Creativity, the faculty of being creative, ability or the power to create. Now, when we get back to these sun deities, we're looking right at the beginning. Most of them have a relationship to creation. Yeah, most of them are in the primitive cultures, in their creationist cultures. The sun is right at the center of that. Even the Hylopolitans for the Egyptians, the sun was right at the center of that. So there's a connection between creativity and the sun, and it's been there right from the beginning. And again, too, that word creative is multi-threaded. It can mean a lot of things. It can mean creating groups of people. It may be creating things. It may be creating monuments. We can look to different elements on the chart that might point us off. Somebody with a strong sun, say in a fire sign, but the dominant element in their chart is earth, might be somebody who's great in a boardroom and can get everybody galvanized and magnetized, but the end result tends to be they manifest something, they build something, and it's physical and it's tangible and it will last in time and things like that. Fire by itself builds nothing, it destroys. So fire itself is a tool, yeah. And that's something to think about too. When we look at the word creativity, that's not a given. Nothing in these is a given. So it's just an invitation to explore and question more. That's what those words are. Yeah. And that'll tell you a lot about the person, I think, at the end of the day. And if we're getting low key answers, or the person doesn't really have an opinion about this or that, or they don't think about it, sun's probably not a big player on their chart. In the big three, maybe we go looking for other things. We go look for the ascendant. They might be more image focused. You know, they might be, their emotions might be so strong, their emotional voice might be so strong, it's snuffing that sun out every time, you know. So they're good places to start. And these kind of questions, when we look at individuality and creativity, we're tapping into their childhood. We're going beyond the surface of where they are right now. And we're exploring that at a much deeper level and a much more primal, visceral level for the person too. You know, we're getting past all that other white noise, all the stuff they've learned from there. Does anybody have anything they want to add about that, or anything they want to say?
Should we look at their progressed sun?
Oh, for sure. You know, they're all different elements, but the reason I like the natal work so much on the natal sun is it stretches out the framework right from the beginning, and then you can decide where to go from there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, especially for the sun, I like to get right to the core, if I can, of a person and find out what's going on there. Yeah. And you're like a doctor after that. You know, you decide what you're going to add to your list. You know, I think we're going to get 30 cc's of progressed sun.
That's a good metaphor. Yeah. Okay.
Self-expression. I think we've covered this, and this is kind of an overlap of all the other ones, but these are the sort of key words that we put in there. Creative expression, authenticity, and individuality. We've explored that. Communication style. A person with very, very strong sun's probably going to ride right over the top of other people. It's probably that person who's got so much charisma that when they say something, everybody just thinks, yeah, that's what I want to do too. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's do that. You know what I mean? They're the person at the center of that group. Person with a weak style, weak sun, probably doesn't even bring their opinion up. Or when they bring it up, it's wrong or it's creepy, and things like that. You know, makes everybody else feel uncomfortable, you know, and things like that. And that might be that moon, that sun with Pluto. Hey, let's kill somebody. You know, let's do it.
I was trying to think of an example, but you nailed it.
Well,
yeah,
you know,
he did.
There's probably something more nuanced than that, but you know, why don't we kill him? Yeah. Excuse me. So radiance and magnetism, you know, that's in there too. We talked about that. Personal image, how you see yourself, how a person sees themselves, how the rest of the world sees them is not the same. We've already talked about that too. And, you know, extreme examples of that are narcissism, but also the opposite applies as well. How the rest of the world sees a person may not be the way they see themselves. We're quite often caught out by this with suicide. We think people are happy. We think people are living rewarding lives, or their careers, we're giving them everything they wanted and stuff like that, and we don't see what's going on underneath the surface. That's not always the sun. But I think it's closer to the sun than a lot of other possibilities too. Maybe their ascendant is very strong. Maybe they're very, very good at giving other people the impression that they want to give, but we don't really know what's going on inside that personality. And when you start getting into things like core beliefs and things like that, it may be some splinter that was planted in them when they were 2 or 3 years old and just festered and never went away. You can't see it, but it may be connected to the sun too, and that may have some sort of connection to their personal image. So, and I don't recommend going exploring and looking for that stuff actively, but sometimes it comes up. And again, too, that is something that comes from listening. When you're talking to somebody who might be very, very successful at what they do or have a happy family and a happy life and all the signs, and then they say something about themselves like, oh, well, I'm useless. You hear a word like that, quite often that's a core belief. That's not their words, that's something somebody planted them, and that's that splinter that was put in them a long, long time ago. You don't have to go chasing down that rabbit hole, but if that's where your reading seems to be going, then that word's going to be worth its weight in gold, and then it's up to you to decide what you want to do about that next. Personally, I think the best person to see would be Michelle, because you're going to put, well, you fill that person up with light and send them out there, and that sounds like, that's it. But if you're not Michelle by design and things like that, then when you hear things like that, then that sounds to me like maybe you need to start looking very carefully at some of the aspects linking to the sun and things like that. Words like I'm useless and ugly, and you look at somebody who's obviously done a lot of work and made themselves look beautiful and things like that, and the image that you're seeing is vivid, but in their mind they're still ugly. They're still that that fat kid in braces that got beat up at school all the time and bullied and things like that, and their minds never left that, and they're still waiting for the rest of the world to figure that out. So the sun, again, too, in a lot of ways, I think we were talking about this earlier. I think that links back to our early self in a lot of ways, and it's our most temporary self as well. It's changing all the time. Some days it's sunny, some days it's overcast. It's still the sun. Okay, which ties into confidence and self-esteem and integration of self. That's a really important phrase, I think, integration of self. Some ways of looking at that as self-ideation, what people do to make themselves feel worthwhile. Some people it's family, some people it's their job, sometimes, some people never figure this out and things like that, but that can tell you a lot about the sun too. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions about that? I think we covered some big stuff, or any examples where they might have seen that. Like I said, when you're tackling self-expression and all of these things, the best tool you've got for all of these is your ears. Your client will always tell you who they are if you listen hard enough. If you ask the right questions, they will always tell you who you are. So what that also means is pick your questions very carefully, because the trajectory of your reading will change with every question that you give. When you're working with difficult clients, when I work with and check your expectations of how you respond to, especially when you get into the dangerous stuff. Like I've worked with clients who've been in a state of suicidal ideation. I was talking about one the other day to another client. She's passed on now, this client, but when she came and saw me, she was so close to suicide. The only reason she didn't kill herself is she couldn't figure out what to do with her dog. She didn't want her dog to suffer, and she'd been living in a state of isolation for a long time. And she came in, and I asked her, so how are you today? What's going on in your world? And that's the first thing she told me. And, and the funny thing was, I wasn't supposed to be the one she was seeing when she came in. She was supposed to see somebody else, and he didn't have that time, and he had seen her multiple times, and this had never come up. But for this one particular day, he was busy, and she ended up on my desk. And my response to that, when I thought about it, you get that initial boom, holy shit, I'm not ready for that. I said, oh, okay, all right. So tell me more about it. Not freak out, not pull away, So, and then find the key words and start building out from there. Okay, so how long have you felt like that? And when you get somebody like that, you're going to be there for a very long time, accept that. But how you react also has a lot to do with the quality of what happens next with that client too. And for me, it's normalize it, okay, don't freak out, so tell me more about that. And then just build out and build out and build out. And before long, you're just talking. And then things work out from there. They do. you know, and just keep listening to the words that they're telling you, and that will help you understand their where they're at right now too. And in astrology, I've deviated a lot there, but from a skills point of view and working with sun stuff, I think that's really, you know, some really useful tools to have in your toolkit. One is normalizing stuff. If you can normalize bad news when people come and stuff like that, not freak out, not recoil, because people see it every time. Just take a breath and then just continue, you know, in a non-condescending way, not an over-comforting sort of way, and just talk about it like you're having a normal conversation. People will relax and they'll just start talking. You know, they're obviously willing to talk, so just give them the opportunity. Anyway, does anybody have any questions about that? We covered a whole lot there too. So, all right. Working with the sun. So this is just a summary of everything we've looked at. Is the sun strongly placed? And that can mean a lot of different things. The sign placement, the sign that it's sitting in, if it's sitting there in Leo or a fire sign, generally that's pretty good. The house placement, what house is it in? You know, is that a good place for the sun? Or is it not a good place for the sun? Suns tend to do well on angles. You know, they like being on angles. Dignity. There's the dignity of the sun good too. So, you know, if they're a Leo, the sun's good, healthy by design, not necessarily mentally healthy by design, just healthy. Same with Aquarius, you know, we've got the opposite there. So is the sun integrated and aspected? If it is, we've talked about that. The sun's the center of the solar system. So if the sun has got other planets all clustered around it and things like that, then the sun's in a great position. And all of those other planets are contributing to that sun in a healthy, organized sort of way. Aspects from the sun to the ascendant, they're also important too. That creates a link between how we see ourselves in the image that we present to the other world, to the world around us. And generally people have got strong, healthy aspects between those two. You know, they're pretty real and they're pretty genuine. I'm generalizing when I say that. When you've got harsh aspects from the sun to the ascendant, quite often you may find that the person either has created a persona to make up for the weaknesses of their sun, but it may not be who they are, or they have created a persona that just doesn't sit right with the people that they meet, doesn't seem to match up with the person that they've met. Sometimes you'll meet people who seem really nice and friendly from the go-get, and their ascendant is, you know, their ambassador, working hard. But once you get to know the real them, that's a completely different shooting match altogether. And I see everybody nodding their heads when I say that, to some degree. So we've all met those people. Okay. The lunar phase can also be an indication at the time of birth, when the chart was created. It doesn't hurt to look at the lunar phase. It can also give us a good indication of the personality integration and how well they integrate with their emotions as well. I won't go into that there. You could pretty much do a whole class on that. But you know, if you're looking at something to research or look at or expand, that's an interesting place to go. You can do that in an hour. And it will give you something useful. And also, if the sun occupies critical degrees, 0 degrees, 13 degrees, or 29 degrees, they tend to be the critical degrees within a house. If they're sitting on those, that can tell you quite a lot about the energy of the sun. 0 degree tends to be whatever that object is burning at full strength, while 29 degrees is it's transitioning from often transitioning from one sign into another. It's the same as when you look at the houses, you've got angular, succeeding, and cadent. It describes a similar relationship between those three. If somebody's sitting on a critical degree or close, then that can give you an idea of the strength of the sun. Yeah.
Can you say that again? So 0 is actually the most intense version of the.
Yeah, considered to be. Yeah, strength.
Oh,
strong.
I thought that was the opposite.
Okay.
I thought the 0 was the weakest, and it was a new energy to that in this lifetime, but it's actually the most magnified.
All right. Well, like I always say, don't take what I say at face value, but that's the way I look at it, and that's the study that I've done. So if you've got something else that you've learned and you've looked at and it's working for you, then don't abandon it just because I said that. But that's the way I look at it. 0 degrees has always been the strongest. And like I said, if it's sitting on a critical degree, I tend to give it attention. But that's not necessarily, you know, if it's floating around in there somewhere too, then that's not necessarily the case. So. Now,
Damien, why do you use 13 degrees and not 15?
I'll just You know, to be honest, I never actually went and researched that. That's just the figure that I was given. You know, you're absolutely right when I think about it. It's probably closer
Yeah, you know,
to the
because
halfway between 0 and 29 degrees. We don't count 30 degrees, so I guess there is no 30 degrees. But, you know, I'm
yeah,
going to go away and I'm going to figure that out. Yeah, thank you, Antoinette.
could be, you know why? Because it's fixed. It's in
Yeah,
the it's like having a
yeah,
sun and
you're right. You're
a
right.
star.
Yeah, okay, cool. And lastly, too, also look at the decan that the sun occupies as well. Um, if you're not familiar with decans, they're 10-degree increments within a sign. So the first
Yeah.
10 degrees, the next 10 degrees, and the last 10 degrees. It's covered in the advanced astrology course too. There's a lesson on decans too. You'll be surprised how what a good job decans can do explaining anomalies within a sign. I've met Pisceans who are volatile. They've got really strong personalities, and they're really bloody minded in the way that they do things. They tend to have be in the Pluto decan. So my sister's one of them. God, she's the least Pisces you will ever meet. She's like the iron hoof and the iron glove. So yeah.
It's
So
like, I got my
decans.
decan sheet printed.
Oh, okay. Yep. Yeah. So decans can also put a spin. Some like fire signs, they don't tend to feel the difference so much, but you know, for some people it does explain things. Fire just tends to work wherever it lands in a lot of ways, but water especially. Gosh, we're talking about each ruler within a decan represents the 3 signs within that element. So we've got the moon, we've got Neptune, and we've got Pluto. Those 3 planets are so powerfully different from one another, and what they teach that, you know, when we look at somebody in a particular sign, you meet those Scorpios who don't seem to be as intense and as nasty, or they seem to be a lot more introspective than other Scorpios, you know, and less likely to stab you in a dark room kind of energy. They don't know whether to sleep with you or kill you, sort of. I apologize to the Scorpions. That's out there. It's not my real take of what Scorpions are like. But they tend to be you know, sensitive and soft and all that sort of energy. Well, maybe they've got the moon, you know, in their decan, stuff like that. Wow, that went wrong really quickly. So okay, so moving on. So there's some considerations when looking at the sun, you know, things that can help. And we've talked about other stuff as well. I think probably the biggest one today is just don't take anything at face value. Don't take any keyword as a given. I see it again and again when people complete those assignments for the Introduction to Astrology course. You know, they feel they're not all the keywords in a sign. Nobody is. But even those keywords, some of those keywords may be relevant, just not at face value. You know, when a person talks about the way they're experiencing a sign. Maybe when the word confidence comes up for Leo, it could be the lack of confidence. That's the defining characteristic about that word for you. Just because you don't have it, doesn't mean it's not important. It's something on your menu, you know, and it will affect you to some greater or lesser degree. And if it's lesser now, maybe in 10 years it could be more important. Maybe 20 years ago, you lived and died by it. I see that a lot, especially with Scorpios. They soften with age and time. They start to understand, you know, hey, you know, maybe I shouldn't act on those thoughts in my head all the time. So, yeah. Anyway, does anybody have any extras they want to throw in there, or any comments or anything like that they want to add? Yeah.
I find it really helpful that you said that your sun is it's most powerful in youth, like when you're a child, because that feels relatable. Like I don't feel like a Leo after years of being dimmed. But when I was a kid, I do think I showed up like a Leo because I didn't know any better. I didn't know to dim myself. And I think that makes me want to ask people now, what were you like as a child?
Yeah.
Because I do wonder if that would, you know, explain why someone, obviously, there's probably a million reasons why you may not show up, but that would actually do it. That if this is someone who's just like life has beat them up, and so that their normal expression just has been hindered. I think that actually makes things really helpful for me.
Comes back to those simple key words. One of them is courage. Our courage is tested all the time. Like I said, the sun is us at our most temporary self. We're always subject to change, depending on what happens to us and how we react to it. And in that way, it's our most temporary self because we're always evolving, we're always changing, we're always, interestingly, like this, the moon, we're ebbing and flowing all the time. But at the end of the day, it's who we are. So when people say stuff like, people don't change and things like that, that's bullshit. People are changing all the time,
Yeah.
all the time.
It's funny what you said, Michelle, about being a happy child, because Leo is childhood and the sun. So yeah, there's always, before you have the conditioning, you're always, and then there comes something always comes along
Yep.
and dims that light.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah, literally it's 13 for me. Like that's the last time I remember being an energetic person. And it's so wild because there's specific things, but my youth was just like awesome, amazing. And
Until puberty.
What?
Until puberty. At 13, so I figured.
Oh. Yeah. I know. Yeah. Well, actually, it was for me. My pattern is narcissism. I've had a lot of narcissists in my life, and I had a narcissist encounter with a teacher, and it like turned me inward. Like I literally, I'm probably showing TMI, but it's I have medical conditions. I have autoimmune conditions, and I've talked to energy healers who I didn't tell them anything about it, and they said it started when you were 13. And it was a shaming thing. Yeah. And so it's literally, it's like, wow, there's all these layers, but my astrology plays out perfectly, except for the fact that Leo has never really made that much sense to me in my adult life. But I think it's just because all of these other things kind of took me off path. And now I think that, astrology has been so validating to me to figure out to get back on track again, actually. But even what you just said, Damien, about your sun is still shining even when it's overcast. So I can still see pieces of the Leo that even when I was still dimmed could not go away. We're not going to go away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I wonder if you feel that same way, Sandra, even if you felt really restricted, there are pieces that just came out, even if you couldn't control them.
Absolutely. There are aspects. It's definitely there. People don't necessarily meet the Leo when they first meet me, or for a long time. But I feel like I'm moving through another stage where I'm growing into. I feel like I have grown into it at certain stages in my life, and it's been knocked back each time because I haven't had the ability to hold it. And so, the maturity gradually may lead us deeper into it. I don't know. It's all a journey, isn't it?
Yeah, that's fascinating though. It's helpful to have a map.
Yeah.
Well, that's what's brought me here. Is I was like, I need to figure this out. I need to understand that this aspect of me that never gets to fully be, alive. So that's why we do astrology.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And the funny thing is too, even with the same chart, with the same makeup, that thing that's bothering you, that thing that you want to work with, refining and changing and growing all the time too. That's the thing that always amazes me when you look at the natal chart. How you looked at it when you were 20 is different to how you look at it when you're 40. And what you look for and how you see yourself defined and things like that. And it's not the journey, it's the consciousness, I think, that's emerging in you and your values and your beliefs. Because, God, you believe everything when you're a kid, or you certainly don't by the time you're 40, but what you've still got is much stronger than anything else that you ever had. I was bulletproof when I was young, which is stupid for most Aquarians. Aquarius is the opposite of Leo. Generally, a lot of Aquarians have quite traumatic childhoods, or they're bullied. There's there's some powerful figure that comes in and weighs in on them. Yet most Aquarians that I meet at a young age are on the self-destructive path. Anyway, they're rebels and they're troublemakers and they're instigators. And, you know, the reason the teacher's kicking their ass all the time is because they're the one who's causing trouble in class all the time. They're the ones who are flipping the desk, or, you know, when the teacher says this is how something works, and see always the Aquarius at the back saying, no, that's not what I read, you know, and things like that. So they go looking for trouble too.
Can I
Sorry.
just share on that? Because my son's an Aquarius, and
Okay.
we homeschool. We homeschool because he insisted that he wasn't going to school.
Okay.
in true Aquarian fashion.
Yeah.
when he was 6, right? And I was like, okay, well, I guess I better get on board here. But like, Aquarians know stuff. And putting them in a system that is so limited to what they're being taught, they're just like, that's rubbish. Like, you know, why are you teaching me this? And so, you know, it's so interesting for me to see the other side of Aquarian, the one that's allowed to be his full expression, and not have that limited. So I'll let you know how it goes.
I don't think you'll ever reach a destination on that, Sandra. It's got to keep going and going and going, that one. Yeah. How old is he?
12.
Oh God, still, yeah, he's still got a while to go on that.
Well, he's just in the process of creating his first business, so he's
Fantastic.
yeah.
Wow. It's either going to be beneficial for the environment, or it's going to be a new doomsday weapon, one of the two.
It could be a combination of both. He's
It's a
gone back to quite
combination.
traditional skills, and he does silver work, leather work, and woodwork, and so he's
Okay.
creating but yeah, he's very much drawn to the old traditions, but obviously has something new to do with it. I'm not sure where that is yet.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
That's cool.
My daughter has an Aquarian friend at school, and she's just hit that age now. She's just come out as gay. She's always the bully, not the bully, but her way of being affectionate with other kids is punching them on the arm or wrestling them to the ground. She wears combat boots. She's always in trouble at school like that, and it's funny because I see all her and Sam, my daughter, says she's an Aquarius. Sam's right into astrology. She's an Aquarius, and it's funny because all her teachers and her parents are rallying around trying to figure out what to do, and I'm thinking, no, she's fine, leave her alone.
Let her go.
She's just doing Aquarius, you know, she'll figure it out.
They've got it all figured out.
Yeah. She'll probably get expelled, but that's okay. She'll survive. I got expelled too, and look what it did for me. I'm fine.
Yeah, I got expelled too.
Yeah, there you go.
You did
Oh yeah.
It's a rite of passage. You can't even call yourself an Aquarius if you haven't either started a major
my
industrial
gosh.
fire or got expelled. So
hilarious.
yeah.
I skipped school, and it became kind of a game between me and the principal because he couldn't really prove it because of the time that I would leave. And then when he took me to his office to tell me that he knew that I was skipping school, he just knew it. I told him that I would leave whenever I wanted to leave, and he said he would chain the doors shut, which he did. So I went out the window, and of course I got suspended.
Oh my God.
That's good.
That is
We're still
fantastic.
So he and I are pretty close. You know, we're still friends. You know, Facebook is
good.
good that way. And so every year on my birthday, he tells me how proud he is that I'm still alive. And then, yeah, he's like, "Woo, that was a close one. I just didn't know about you. You were gonna make it this far." Every year he's yes, that was a handful.
That's amazing.
It's funny now, but it wasn't funny for the whole high school that was outside
It's
looking for
defining
me.
though, isn't it? Yeah.
I was under my car hiding.
Oh my God.
I got expelled for being a subversive influence. They sent a letter. I was not invited to a meeting They just sent a letter, and that was it on the school holidays. At the Christmas holidays at the end of the year, they sent a letter. We are expelling him for being a subversive influence, encouraging other children to perform destructive acts, and so on. So
Oh my gosh.
I was really angry as a kid and persuasive, I guess, too. So that's not a good combination.
Oh wow.
Anyway,
Did
on
you
that note-
feel
Sorry?
I was just going to ask if you felt like you weren't being mentally challenged, just like Sandra's son, that you were just like, this is ridiculous and I need to, it was that it part of it?
We did Michael and go. I was unhappy at home. I had a really difficult family life, so I acted out at school. That's how I did it.
I'm sorry I asked that question.
That's all right. No,
I was
don't be
just trying
sorry.
to make a correlation.
It's a story. It's a story now, and I've moved on from there too. So don't be shy to ask questions by all means.
Okay.
But yeah, home life wasn't good. So at school was where I played out. I think when I first went to school, I was a very shy kid. By the time I left, I was a threat that needed to be stopped. And that's the way life works, isn't it? Especially when Saturn's in charge. So, and it sets you up and then it knocks you down. So that's the way things work. It's the cycle, isn't it? Anyway, talking about sons and experiences, why don't we have a look at Michelle, whose sun is in her second house in Leo. So just based on some of the things, that is correct. Yeah, I've got that right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So just
like, how does he know? He's psychic. But I did put that on the chart on the Facebook.
Well, I was also expelled for being psychic, Michelle. I can't believe, but I can believe you got expelled too, Michael, and it's so validating.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I was in.
Here we are working together.
I was in detention. I was very. I like Sandra's son. I thought it was rubbish. I thought it was silly that this is 10th grade that this happened. I was 16, and I just thought it was ridiculous that what they were teaching us was rubbish, and I didn't want to be there. So, but they told me I had to be, and when they told me I had to be, that's when I started coming up with creative ways to not be. And this was before computers. I would write my own hall pass. I knew when I could write the passes. I had it all figured out until, which he never really could get me for the skipping. He never had real evidence. It was always, which I don't know how. But that, going out the window, that was, yeah. But there were other things that happened that I got in trouble for at school. But my home life was I was raised by a man, and he was a Scorpio. Okay, so my mom left when I was real young. So basically, it was me, my dad, and my brother. And so and I have Uranus in my first house at 2 degrees. So I was pretty rebellious and I just didn't like being told what to do. Now 11th grade and 12th grade I did great because they let me leave at 10 o'clock. I got to go to school and they let me leave at 10 o'clock to go to work. So I had perfect attendance.
Great.
Oh wow.
10th grade I was a force to be reckoned. I was 16. When I turned 16 I knew everything.
Well, the best thing was too, you were right, you didn't have to be there.
I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I did. They made me. That's why I was upset. I didn't like that.
Until they didn't make you anymore.
Right.
That's my point. You were correct in the end. You did not have to be there.
Right. Well, in the end, I did win because they let me leave.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Yes. So, I didn't even think about it that way, Damien. Thank you.
You were right.
I'll talk to my principal about that later. I'm always right. You sound like my husband.
Okay, so Michelle, Leo, Moon in the second house. Just looking at some of the things we talked about today, what are some of the simple assumptions we could take away? And we've got Michelle here right now to talk to. So what are people seeing with this placement?
So the second house is the house that it's I feel, correct? Like the first house is I am, the second house is I feel. Okay, so she's got Leo in the second house, and she said she's never really felt like a Leo. Maybe it's because it's in the second house, and that's the house of Taurus, which is a grounded energy. And it's a house of feeling, and it's in the first decan. So I can't recall what that's ruled by. Let me see.
I think it might be
Anyway, it doesn't
Jupiter.
matter. In the first decan would suggest to me that she's early, you know, I think the farther along the degree, as far as in the deck, is like first, second, and third decan. Maybe you're in the first decan, you're kind of in
First
your
is the
your
sun. It's a double head of the sun. Generally, for the sign, it's the traditional ruler, I think. So, yeah,
It's like,
okay, but
so
being,
it's a double Leo.
yeah.
okay, all right, and then being in the first decan, she's in the beginning of her journey as a Leo. So she's a baby Leo, is what I'm trying to say. She's, you know, we've got in life, we've got middle age, and then we've got three. So what I'm trying to say is she's just starting out as a Leo in this lifetime.
Okay.
Nice way to look at it.
So values are important too. And it sounds like a lot of your experience values have been challenged, I guess. It's funny because life in the second house is often about currency, and the currency is not always money. So maybe the currency is self-worth, it's ego, it's value, your values that about yourself. And narcissists will test that all the time, I guess. So maybe.
That's so interesting. Because, yeah, values are incredibly important to me. And I never made the connection. When I look at that house, I think money, I think abundance. I was not thinking about values. But I have my integrity is bizarrely like, I will not lie. I do not cheat. I don't steal. I don't play by a lot of the rules that narcissistic people play by. So they look at me and they're just like, oh, this one's easy. Because she's not going to play our games. Like,
so the first decan for Leo is ruled by Saturn.
Oh,
so that maybe have something to do with that.
All right.
Yeah, that checks out.
Sounds like a very accurate sort of reflection of your story, doesn't it? You have been tested, you have been challenged and pushed. Yeah. Okay. There's a karmic aspect to it too, I guess. Where's Saturn on your chart?
It's right on top of my ascendant in the 12th house.
Okay.
Actually, it's right on top of Venus is sitting on my ascendant, but Saturn is like 2 degrees away from it.
Okay. So what are some of the takeaways we can get from that? If we were just to do a simple sort of wrap up of that, where would we land? What would we see? We've got Sun in the second house in Leo. So let's use some of those words. What about ego, self-expression? And we've got Saturn involved here as well. So is it strong or is it challenged?
The second house also rules money and finances, and so it would make sense that the Sun in the second house would suggest that what she does for a living, she puts herself out there. She also kind of has a Leo appearance because she's got that gorgeous hair that's just a beautiful mane of hair. You know what I mean? And I've watched her videos, and her communication style is very it's great. I mean, it's very magnetic, just like
energy.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that being in the second house, I think that helps her be able to communicate the way that she does, using her feelings, and even using Saturn as a way to keep everything kind of what's the word I'm looking for, in a little box, without getting too far out there. Does that make sense?
It does. I think Saturn being involved too will also keep it authentic in terms of values and things like that too. Values are important. Saturn challenges us to be authentic because it punishes us when we're not, I think. I talked before about mental health and well-being and stuff like that. They're not necessarily the same thing. Left unchecked, the sun especially can get out of control pretty quickly. Gosh, a really, really strong aspected Aries sun, God, what a handful they can be. You know, and they won't listen to anybody. They won't do anything you tell them. In fact, it's all the fire signs to a degree. Sagittarius certainly fits into that box too. More you get to know them, the more they're going to fight you. That's my experience with Sagittarius. They're less interested they are in doing what you tell them to do. So I think having Saturn involved challenges you right from the go-get to be more authentic and be more real about what you're saying, because you're going to be on probation. You'll be accountable for what you do. You'll get your feedback pretty quickly. The stupid
That's
thing
interesting because I do feel that way. I do feel like I'm under an accountability to some higher force that it's like nobody's telling me to do these things, but Saturn probably is. I've always felt very restricted, like and like a rule follower. I'm a rule follower, 100%.
When do you feel you're most restricted? What's happening? You know, if you're talking about restriction, when do you feel you're most restricted? What rule are you breaking? If we're talking about Saturn, is it about being yourself? Is it about being authentic? About not being honest to your values and things like that? Because you say you're super obsessive. Those are my words. You put a high priority on values and things like that. Is that where you feel maybe Saturn's influence? Is that forcing you to be that way, or is it punishing you when you're not?
I think that my values are so strongly of being a good person, being a kind person, being agreeable. So the Saturn is like forces me to like, whereas I think normally you would say like your authenticity would be not worrying about being agreeable. I think in my case, it squashes me into not allowing myself to do things according to my own drive. There's like there's almost like this built-in oppression that I need to do things for the greater good a lot of times. Like I very, very rarely choose things because it's just my choice. I'm thinking about other people a lot of the time. And I don't know if that's something else in my chart because I have so much water, or but it feels like I've always wondered if Saturn was doing something there from the 12th house, even if it brought in past life karma that I was still trying to live through.
You need to explore that, because if you're using the word doing the right thing and oppression in the same sentence, that's a really powerful cognitive dissonance between those two words.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'd explore that if I were you. I'd have a deep dive into that one and talk about it and think about it. Things like that.
Very, very much. I would really look into that, because if Saturn is the ruler of our 7th house, it could be other people definitely may have a hold, you know, and in the 12th, there's something about themselves that's one of the questions that I had for tonight, actually. But we don't have to answer it right now, but I'm going to ask you maybe in the group.
Okay. Okay. Well, there you go. There's an interesting insight into maybe the way the sun's playing out on your chart.
And isn't the 12th house the house of hidden enemies? And if Saturn is ruling that first decan of the sun, maybe she has had some issues with some hidden enemies. We call them narcissists, like you were saying before, Michelle. So
Well,
maybe that's why
Venus as well, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah. With the Venus right there too, which that's love. Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh?
Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. That's really helpful.
So you're supposed to be strong. You're supposed to be magnetic, but you're supposed to fight for it too. You know, it's not going to be given to you. You're going to have to work hard to get it. Sounds like you're doing. But just again, too, like I said, some of your language choices when you're talking about it, especially that word oppression, you know, bring up some interesting red flags. I'd be, you know, I'd want to explore that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that just come out of nowhere, that word. But that's a big word. That's a powerful word.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And on that note, we'll leave you hanging by a cliff if you're okay, and move on to Sandra, who has almost afraid to ask now. She's probably almost afraid to answer.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything.
It didn't have to go like this. Okay, so 22 degrees of Leo in the 4th house. Are we correct, Sandra?
That's correct, yeah.
Is that correct? Okay, she sounds like she's in court right now. Yes, Your Honor, that is correct. An expert witness. Okay. I promise it won't be like that. What can we tell about Sandra just from looking at that placement? And knowing full well that Leo is also sitting right around there somewhere. Sorry, not Leo, Saturn. It's right there too.
Well, she's in the 3rd decan, and the 3rd decan in this case is going to be ruled by Mars. So she's 4th house, which is the house of roots, family, and then she's in the 3rd decan, which is ruled by Mars. So that means action, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So.
Let me just, while we're looking at this, let me ask. Let's approach this in a different way, rather than let's try and figure Sandra out. Let's look at it from the point of view of if Sandra was our client, just looking at that placement, what are some of the questions we might ask her? Knowing also that Saturn's lurking around there. You're also talking about, what's the ruler of that decan, sorry? Mars?
It's Mars, yes.
Yeah. If we were just looking at this chart for the first time, which for many of us we are, what are some of the questions we might ask? Some of the based on some of the assumptions we might make about that placement. And maybe we are also aware of that Saturn that's sitting in there too, because that's looking at as a big player. I think next time we do this, it wouldn't hurt to have the actual charts of people, and I'll put any aspects that we've got in there too that might be filtering the planet we're looking
Maybe
at.
what her home life is like would be a question to ask, if there's any volatility, you know, because Mars is involved now or in the past.
Good question.
Yeah. So growing up in my home, my dad was an alcoholic. So yeah, there was quite a lot of volatility there. And Mars is in my 12th house as well. So
Okay, very cool.
Okay.
I mean, very cool. The similarity is what I mean. So yes.
It does a lot to answer the puzzle of why you don't feel like a full-blown Leo too, doesn't it? I think you've got these, well, I mean, my question would be like Michael and said, it'd be family specifically about the father, because you've got the 2 representatives of the father. And I'm just talking, I'm not asking you questions, I'm not asking you to divulge information about yourself. But look, if I saw that, I'd think I'd have the father who'd be full of life and magnetic 1 minute, and then volatile and restrictive the next, you know, and you don't know what you're going to get in a given day. I'd see that Mars deck in there, and it would be about personal power, I guess, you know, about learning personal power under such duress and in such challenging conditions and things like that. I'd see that up there in the 12th house too. I'd maybe suppressed and hidden anger. And things like that. Somebody who was never allowed to express their anger and stuff like that. And so that's buried in there, and it's buried in deep. And Leonine anger is something to behold when it happens, and quite often directed at the self. So you know, that's some of the things I might say. What else? Does anybody else have any other questions they might ask about that?
What she does for a living, if that is integrated, if that intertwines with home and family and roots and where she's from, maybe.
Okay.
Do you want me to answer?
Please.
It's up to you. It's up to you. Like I said.
Oh no,
it's
yeah,
fine.
totally up to you.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, so I since having my child, obviously he decided to not go to school, and so that impacted how I work in the world. So for a long time, I couldn't, and then we moved to the middle of nowhere, and people started finding me for reflexology, which was something I had trained in quite a few years earlier. And then I created an online business in trauma and energetic trauma release. So yeah, home is very much an aspect of that.
Awesome. Well,
Awesome.
that's very cool. I can see that. That's neat.
Yeah.
And Mars being there too, which means that and you know you have to stay active and you got a lot that you have to do from home, especially teaching your son.
He teaches himself.
I know. Well, I know. Homeschooling. Let's put it like that. Homeschooling your son, being there with him. That's interesting. That's very interesting.
But the Mars aspect does come up for me because I've gone through a period of not doing enough and therefore finding my energy very depleted. So yeah, it's always a reminder that I need to fuel through action.
Great. Great. Okay. Now, Rax, she was supposed to turn up today, but we don't have her to ask, so I might skip that if everybody's comfortable with that, unless you want to just do this from the question point of view. If you saw a client with that placement, either that or we can just move on, I think. How does that sound?
I think we should move on since they didn't.
We
weren't
can't
able to
really
make
rebuttal.
it.
Adrienne's not here today. Antoinette, 5th house, 6 degrees of Pisces.
Yes, it's in the house of Leo.
Okay. It's an interesting placement. See, I think of you as Leo energy in some ways when I see you. If I was given a guess for the first time, I'd say the same thing. You've got that Leonine mane, you've got that sunny personality, your warmth, you've got a magnetic quality about you too. So, that's generally, if somebody asked me straight up, I'd be wrong. And I always am when it comes to picking. Some signs I can pick, most I can't. Just from based on personality. Generally, it's once people start talking, I key into what they're coming from. I could have seen that.
I feel a lot of times I feel more Leo than Pisces, but it's a strange placement for Pisces because of other things. Here comes.
You're also ruled by Saturn in the first decan of Pisces, by the way. Where's your Saturn in your chart, Antoinette? That's interesting, isn't it?
Saturn is right there too. He's right there up on my sun.
Well.
Oh wow.
Right?
But it's not just any sun. It's not just the sun in Pisces. It's the sun conjunct Chiron, conjunct South Node, conjunct Mercury retrograde. Wow. It's like Groundhog Day for me every day.
Well, no wonder you don't come across as a Pisces. You wouldn't come across as a Pisces in your right mind, would you, with all of that going on?
Right.
Yeah.
It wouldn't make it out the door. All the time.
God, I wish Adrienne was here for this. There's a tarot card for that. I'll look it up. I'm actually working on a deck at the moment that focuses on all the astrological rulers for each of the cards. And got to be, so, but there's a ruler, a ruling planet and sign for each card. And I know there's Saturn and Pluto. I just off the top of my head cannot remember which one it is. But that'd be interesting. Adrienne would know, bang, straight away like that.
When for Pisces, And now, well, it's 8 of Cups, Saturn in Pisces. So that's not a
You know, I challenge anybody at this level who's doing this kind of work to not have an active Saturn on their chart. I think Saturn is the component for personal change, challenge for personal change. Generally, the people who become astrologers, the people I work with, the people who come and see me, there's some sort of Saturn action on their chart that will not let them ignore something. And it keeps coming up again and again and again. And the longer in life they go without addressing it, the more it festers. And the more it demands attention. And the worst thing about it is it doesn't matter how successful you are or how many things you own or things like that, that Saturn will not let you be happy and content. Yeah. And I would say that especially once you start getting, in the reading techniques course, I talk about 3 different client types. When people start getting into the spiritual stuff, Saturn's often the catalyst. That's the one that goes in there. It's like, you know, for the first few lives we've partied. Okay, but that time is over. It's over now. So grab your stuff. Whatever you manage to accumulate in those first few lives, I'll give you 5 minutes and then we're going out that door. That's generally how I see it working. And that's often how Saturn seems to impact. You know, what you pick up before you go out the door, that's the stuff that you'll be carrying into the next part of your spiritual evolution. And those are the pieces of the puzzle. You've got to somehow try and get those things to all start integrating and working together. And the more I talk, the more I do sound like a doom and gloom astrologer. But, you know, hey, if you've got a strong Saturn on your... Sorry?
I agree with that from, like, I can see that with both myself and Michelle from a Leo perspective. You know, the 2 things that have really come through for both of us are the heart and the authenticity from Leo. It's like getting down to the core of the value of Leo in your second house. And, you know, so, you know, maybe it is stripping bare those signs to see what their true authentic value is. Well, for me it was bringing it out, wasn't it, because I was in the 3rd decan. But yeah, I find it interesting that we both seem to have taken the same elements from our Leo.
But I think the position of Saturn on the chart will start impacting most people who start doing the deeper work. And for Leo too, you know, the unevolved Leo is a big deal. They see themselves as a big deal. Saturn suddenly becomes the heckler who's screaming, so why are you a big deal? What's so special about you? You know, they start challenging you. It's not enough to just believe you're the best thing since sliced bread anymore. You know, and it will start laughing at you. It'll start mocking you. It'll start getting the crowd working against you if you can't produce the goods to back up what you're talking about, you know. So you're pretty. So what? There's pretty people here. There's pretty people everywhere. What sort of person are you? You know. Oh, so you're a good actor. So you've got a great acting range and stuff like that. But what about the real stuff? Can you do that? You know. And Saturn holds you to account for all of that, and it mocks you when you can't. You know. So. I don't know. I just put that out there. I think I believe for a long time that people who are really starting to get into the deeper work and things like that, they've got a Saturn that's beating up on them somewhere on their chart and making them do it. It's been hanging around for a while. If we look at it from a point of lifetimes, it's been festering and getting bigger and stronger and more powerful all the time. You know. So, because you've been doing stuff in past lifetimes, you've been accumulating a tab, and Saturn is the tab. You know, it's here demanding to be paid this lifetime. That's how karma works in a lot of ways. It's not a draconian force. There's nothing coming at you that you shouldn't be aware of to some degree, or that you haven't at least earned or picked up. I refer to karma as spiritual frequent flyer points. You know, you pick them up as you go. And except they spend you, that's the only difference. You know, I put that out there, you know, challenge that. Maybe you'll see it in other people's charts. Maybe you won't. Maybe you don't feel the same way. Maybe I am a doom and gloom astrologer. You know, so, okay. Michaelin. Well, I think we already know about her. She's a bit of a rebel. I don't think we should be encouraging her, people.
Wild child. Yeah.
Okay. where's your
My
Saturn?
my Saturn is in my ninth house, retrograde, and I believe it's Cancer. I'm not sure. Yes, I believe that's so. So, and I've got a yod from Saturn to the Sun to something else. Let's see. Yeah, so Saturn's in the ninth house, and it is Cancer, and then the yod is between Neptune and the Sun. Those are at the bottom. So second house and fourth house. Either way, yes, my Saturn is at the very top of my chart in the ninth house, and everything else is at the bottom or to the left.
Okay. Wow.
And that's the second decan. So who rules that?
Oh goodness, let me see. Yes, so that's Mercury. Mercury. And Mercury's retrograde in my chart too, by the way.
Wow.
But you got Saturn,
Saturn's retrograde as well.
but your sun is conjunct Saturn.
No, my sun
in the
is
ninth.
opposite. Yeah, so is it conjunct? Maybe it is. I don't know. It's in a yod. So the sun is in the fourth, the Saturn is in the ninth, and then Neptune is in the second, and they are in a yod form at.
Okay. The sun is in the fourth. Okay.
Yes, yes.
where's
Along
your
with a
Mercury?
lot of
The
other planets.
point of the yod is Saturn up in the ninth house. Is that what you're saying? So you've got Neptune in the second house?
Yes. So Neptune is in these. Yeah. But in my chart, next to the sun, I've got Mercury, and then the next house, I've got Venus, and then Jupiter. So it kind of, and then Mars is in the third house.
So your Mercury's in the fourth house next to your sun. Is that what you
Right.
said?
Yes, it
And
is.
And
It
Mercury is
is.
the ruler of this placement.
So
Right. And
Saturn
Mercury's
is retrograde.
correct. And Mercury is retrograde as well.
Okay, so let's look at the sun as being the seat of the personality. Let's look at it from a dignity point of view, because the sun's in a bad placement in Aquarius. It's not in a strong placement, let's say that. So the ego itself, the ego in the rawest sense, the purest sense, has never developed the same way with Aquarius and things like that. So when it comes to your chart, perhaps the sun is not the major player, and that's reinforced by this yod. So rather than talking about where Saturn is, we're going straight to Saturn on your chart. You've got a yod pointing to Saturn up in the ninth house. So your sun is an accomplice. It's a tool in this. It's not the be all and end all. So you know what I'm saying? And we've got Neptune in the second house, which is all about belief and faith, and the intangible, that we try and make tangible. So you've got a sun in the fourth house, which is rebelling against the concepts of family. You've got Neptune in the second house, in the house of values, which is describing or responding to values probably other people don't understand because they're internal. They may be difficult to articulate, especially with your retrograde Mercury. So you have a set of internal values that you're aware of that drive you, that you don't necessarily understand yourself because they're not tangible. They don't produce results. It's like hard work. You only ever know if hard work will pay off in time. You never know on the day. So that's got a lot to do with your belief systems, but that's all pointing off to Saturn in the ninth house, which is ruled by, what's the rule? Sagittarius.
Oh, the ninth house is in my chart. It's Cancer.
It's Cancer. That's
yes.
right. You mentioned
Right.
Cancer.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's about emotions.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right, and I've got the moon in the 12th house next to Pluto.
Okay.
Oh my
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, my chart is just it's something else. I'm telling you. Every time I look at it, I think, what?
I think we got to do your chart sometime. Yeah. Does that sound good? Let's do that.
Yeah, we could totally do it.
That's so funny because
Definitely.
she is always bringing in people. So yeah, we definitely need to have her on the hot seat.
It's the hot seat now.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Great. All right. So that's just a little bit from me. What do other people think? What might you see from that sun placement down there?
Definitely, it's like when I see the sun in the fourth, I wanted to say like feel it should be in the fifth, but I have to sacrifice something to be for family.
Yeah.
It's like be a mom before I forget, have no childhood, because I'm always being all this. It has this mother energy, but at the same time, it's a misfit in Aquarius. It's like I feel detached from the family, or the black sheep of the family, or the rebellious of the, you know.
Yes.
That's
very.
interesting too, because you've got that's Saturn up in the ninth house in Cancer, and it's aspected, which is motherhood again too. It's motherhood whether you like it or not, I guess. And you're going to force you're going to develop your values, and you're going to develop your beliefs around that. Aquarius left to their own devices can be incredibly destructive, either self-destructive or destructive to other people. They can rebel at an unevolved level. They can rebel just to rebel. They can be the upstart just to upset the apple cart and things like that.
As a teenager.
Well, you've been attached to a greater purpose that you can't avoid, you can't deny, you can't fight, and you're going to learn some stuff because there's Neptune down the bottom there, and you're going to have to get real about your own values and what you believe and who you are, whether you like it or not. So I'm just building off Antoinette. That's what I hear. I completely agree.
Do you value your children?
What's that?
Say again.
I was saying, say she values her children.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 All right.
Like those things.
And I think that isn't that close to where your Saturn is?
It costs you money. Children cost money.
Yeah, look at that, Damien.
Wow.
Yeah. I was talking to Michaelin about this the other week, actually. What I'm thinking, rather than go through it today, I might just do what Michaelin's doing and throw it out there one week if everybody's comfortable doing it that way, which means you'll hear less from me, which probably will make things easier. But how does that sound? Are you guys happy to do my chart at some point?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
we've already been talking about that behind your back.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, I'll leave that to Michael, and she's the boss. We've gone way into overtime. That's completely my fault, by the way. I have no idea.
I've had a lot of people say, "Hey, I have a good idea," and I'm like, "I think that's a great idea." So a lot of people have mentioned that. So that's definitely happening, Damien.
All right, no worries. Cool. I'll let you decide how that goes. Yeah, and when, all that stuff. But we're definitely doing Michaelin's too. And again, too, the offer's out there for anybody who's feeling brave enough to share themselves with the group. I think you know enough about who we are now. And I'd love to do your chart, Sandra. It sounds like a fascinating one. Yeah. Oh, God, what a day. That's a lot. That's a hell of a lot.
Have you done Michelle's chart before?
No.
Is there a recording of that? Oh, I thought from the conversation that it had been done before. So
not at all.
I was gonna check out the recording.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we haven't done Michelle's chart, but that invitation's floating out there sometime too. So.
But Michelle does have a YouTube channel, and she has a lot of very good content. If you want to check it out, tell her about it, Michelle.
Michael is my best supporter, so
I love it.
Very much a good cheerleader. That's your Cancer, yeah, your Cancer energy.
What's your YouTube channel called, Michelle?
Happy Healthy Her.
Happy.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'll check it out.
And I'll post it. Well, I'll post the link so that everybody can check it out. You're gonna love it. She's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, she is great. She's incredibly articulate too. So yeah, which is really, really good. All that Leo energy comes out.
Well, that's funny you say that. I think you, Damien, are the most articulate, and so I actually feel like I'm kind of a spaz, but I'm authentic. So I'm kind of like when I look at my chart, I'm like, I'm really who I am.
I was watching your videos and I was thinking for 20 minutes you can sit there or more and talk about a topic. Me, I need to be talking to people. And if I'm not, I
Oh,
need to.
really?
Yeah, I do. If I'm talking to people, I can talk all day. That's a Leo moon for you. But when it comes to just sitting talking to a camera, for me, it's actually it's quite awkward. It's quite difficult.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Oh, it's
especially-
totally awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it doesn't
very
come
awkward.
across. Does not come across. So you're doing a great job there.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, good job. So I only see it growing. Yeah, awesome. Well, that's kind of wrapping up today, guys. Guys, I think that's a lot. We unpacked a lot there today. I had some ridiculous idea that was only going to take an hour and a half at the most, but we've gone way past that. So I'll try and be more disciplined next time, but I think we've got more of a structure, and I think we've got more of an idea of how to do things in future. So I promise you the next one will be a little more disciplined. I shudder to think what the time is, where everybody is right now. Sandra and I are going to probably pop off for lunch after this, but for the rest of the world, it's probably bedtime or wherever you are and stuff like that. Look, I really appreciate you guys. I'm glad to always happy to see your faces and to be doing this work with you. So I feel incredibly blessed by that, and I just want to put that out there. I'm looking forward to other adventures and other stuff we're going to do together. So
thank you for so much of your time and wisdom. It's so amazing. All of you, actually. I learned so much from these things. It's just unbelievable.
You're welcome.
Yes, me too. Thank you, guys.
The environment of support too, which I really appreciate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can enjoy it when you watch it. You record.